What is your childhood memory that you thought was normal but realized it was traumatic later in your life? When I was 11, my parents helped a battered wife out of an abusive situation. Her husband was a bad guy but was still roaming free. Nobody knew where he was, and he had made serious threats against my family. My mum ran me through the steps if he were to break in. I would get my younger siblings in the closet with me. She would run and draw him out and away from the house to a predetermined location in the backyard. Once they left, I would take the shotgun out of the closet and shoot him. I was groomed to kill a man at 11. Never had to, but totally prepared. My son's best friend came from an abusive home, frequent hard drugs, probably meth, etc. Blood on the walls. The friend hid out for a few weeks with us. With the blessing of his dad and grandparents, we had to school my son on where to hide his best friend and siblings in case the mom showed up. He was maybe 7 or 8. Now 10, they're still best friends, and he still comes over all the time. It sucked to explain a bit of it to my son, but I love this kid too. Thank goodness the dad has custody now. When I was a kid, if I ever misbehaved even slightly, I would get a savage ass whooping. The only fucked up part, that I thought at the time, was that the beatings never varied depending on the severity of my misconduct. I bring home an vicious beating. I accidentally forget to take out the trash. Same beating. Never any variation. It wasn't until I was almost 15 that my mind was blown. I went over to a friend's house and shortly after arrival, his mom came in and started yelling at him because the school called, and he got caught trying to forge her signature for something. He did something that would have left me swollen and blue, and I was getting ready to just bail because I didn't wanna see the incoming whooping. But after she was done yelling, she just hugged him and said she was more disappointed than angry and that they would need to work on things. I was like, what? Where's the ass whooping? Turns out, not every parent decides to beat the living shit out of a kid for every transgression, big or small. Just mine. Edit. Obviously it was not just mine, I was being somewhat facetious. My condolences to all my fellow Redditors who have experienced similar things. We're not alone. We survived and we are stronger for it, as shitty as it may have been. I was really shocked by the fact the mother hugged him. My mom never beats me. I'm too old now, I guess. She did a few times when I was little. She just yells and makes me feel really bad and then asks me 2 minutes later why I stopped telling her about my life and problems. When my mum was having a bad day, before I'd leave by myself for primary school, she would say, if I'm not here when you get back, you know why, implying that she would kill herself because of her stressful life. During fits of rage my mum would threaten to drive off of the road, off of bridges to kill herself. With us in the car with her. So scary to constantly worry that she would snap and actually do it. I feel for ya. When it was my weekend with my dad, I would be dropped off at people's houses and I thought it was fun because it was all so different and got to meet new people. When I got older I realized it was neglect and he was palming me off while he went elsewhere. My best friend's mum did that to her in elementary school. We'd hear a knock at the door and find her sitting on the porch with her bag. Her mom never told us she was coming, just dumped her there for a few days so she could go off and do who knows what. I never understood at the time because I was just excited that his friend was staying at my house for a week. But no, I realize her mom just didn't want to take care of her. My big brother used to give me treats. M&M's, brownies, cheese and bread. Only years later did I realize he was sneaking me food because we were not being fed. I am healthy and functional today because a 3-year-old stole food for me. A 3-year-old? Question mark. Holy crap. It's amazing and sad what young children can learn when they have to. I hope you're both doing well now. I know how you feel. My mother didn't have food in the house when my brother and I were living with her. The fridge was only full when she had her boyfriends around. To this day I take my brother to go get food any chance I can. There's no way in hell I'm letting that little dude feel what being that hungry was like again. Holy crud guys. Didn't expect silver. Wow. And gold. being hungry all the time. Doctor at the end. I have PKU, which is basically a genetic condition that is treated with an incredibly restrictive diet. I knew a list of things I absolutely could not have, and I had printed books that told me how much I could have of certain foods, and I mostly had to take a packed lunch everywhere with me, even when just going round to friends' houses. The problems came when my parents divorced, my mum basically kicking my dad out and taking custody of me and my siblings. And she immediately stopped caring. She made sure I stuck to my diet but made no actual effort to make sure I was eating enough to function. At its worst point, I was eating a small bowl of cereal in the morning, 25 grams, a few slices of cucumber, tomatoes made me sick, and seeped into the lettuce of my school salad. An apple. I'd be given an orange as well, but the stringiness of it made me sick. A carton of apple juice. Then in the evening, a small plate of whatever was left over from what my family had eaten the day before, but in small amounts, as I could only have tiny quantities of most of it, with the parts I couldn't have removed. And that was it. That was what I ate every day most days for over a year. During the holidays it was worse because my mum had to make me my lunch herself and she just wouldn't bother. I couldn't make it myself as I was 9, I couldn't eat most conveniently available snacky foods, I couldn't eat bread, I couldn't have crisps, we rarely had fresh, readily available food. So a lot of the time I'd reach into the rubbish bin and eat whatever my brother had thrown away. And my mum smoked, so a lot of times it tasted of ash, but I was so hungry I didn't care. I always assumed this level of hunger and desperation was just how everyone with the condition lived because my diet was so restrictive, and my mum was pretty manipulative and had me convinced that a lot of things were my fault, including her failing relationships, her inability to hold a job, her failed marriage, my dad's sickness. Like I thought, this has to be because of my diet, this has to be how everyone with this condition lives, in a constant state of hunger. Cut to a year or so later, I was living with my dad's parents. Typical grandparents, they would go out of their way to make sure I was fed. They cooked larger portions of unrestricted food and allow me to serve myself at the dinner table, search for recipes made for people with my condition, or altered recipes they already used. They made sure I knew where the food I could eat was, and what it was, so that I could get my own snacks without having to wait on someone else to sort me out. I zipped from badly underweight, to borderline overweight. Even so, the light bulb didn't go off until I was 16 and my specialist pediatrician arranged for me to meet some other adults, 20 plus, with the condition to give me hope for the future. It was a great experience, but I still remember the look everyone gave me when I asked how they dealt with the crippling hunger when they were a little kid. It was like I'd sprouted a second head. They all explained, including my pediatrician, that none of them had gone hungry as children, they'd always had food, and that's when it hit me how willfully negligent my mum was. All those times I thought she'd been trying her hardest to be a mum, was really just her being lazy and refusing to try. Even to this day, I have an unhealthy willingness to go hungry for longer than I should. I'm talking days, often having to be reminded by people to eat because I'm just so used to going without for extended periods of time. One weird example was when my older brother and I asked for Digimon starter decks for Christmas. But my mom and her boyfriend only had money for one for my brother. I got some cheap squirt guns or something. My mama had to leave for whatever reason and I was pouting. My mom's boyfriend asked me what was wrong and I told him I didn't get a Digimon deck. He went over to my brother and asked him if that was true. My brother looked scared and said yes. All I remember is him hitting my brother all over and my brother screaming, trying to crawl away while he dragged him by his legs from the living room into the kitchen, hitting him all over. Then I remember him throwing him an ice pack. It was normal cause we were beat all the time and it only seemed fair he should get beat real bad since he got the Digimon deck, but I didn't. Somehow this freaks me out more than a lot of the more extreme stuff on this thread, since the mindset of punishing a kid for getting a toy is so messed up. Hope you and your brother are doing well these days and the boyfriend died in a fire. In my experience, Logical people usually don't abuse children. That actually helped me as a child to realize that some abuse was actually abuse, because the abuse was already normalized but the situations and justifications were illogical. My biggest example was that my mom shoved me through a door, then slapped me because I broke my door. If it literally doesn't make sense, you can't claim that it is normal or excusable. My cousin's extremely religious mother would practice rapture drills with her. This consisted of her mom bursting into her room at like 3 o'clock a.m., banging pots and pans together, and screaming, "It's the rapture. The rapture is happening. Will you be saved?" ? She would then make my cousin confess her sins to her and then tell her that she would be going to hell for her sins. It terrified her, but she thought that this was a normal thing that all mothers do until adulthood, when she casually mentioned it in conversation and the whole room went silent. Her now husband had to explain to her that no, that is not normal.